How's everybody's morning going? Matthew, how you doing today?
I am doing pretty awesome. It is great to have you, or it's great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's been a long morning already, even though it's only 9 o'clock here in the Seattle area.
Yeah, absolutely. And for everybody tuning in over in the comment section, this is my first live stream, so I'm actually super happy to be doing this, and I've appreciated the turnout that we have so far. I'm in the studio mode at least. Matthew, are you on the regular page? How many people are actually tuned in at the moment?
We have 34 people watching now and an
Fantastic.
active chat going.
Yeah, I can see the active chat at least. So we will be monitoring that throughout to answer questions. But our primary topic here is going to be data flows, and it's a thing that Matthew you're very familiar with. And um, the last couple of months, there's actually been some really cool stuff that you've been doing. I know one of the videos on the lazy tutorial that you did recently had me honestly in stitches regarding a lot of stuff in data flows, and that was just one of those where I've seen through that and also a lot of your Twitter feed, Twitter posts and everything else. Like you just there's a lot of like extra and awesome personality that you exude in your online presence, and it's just I finally had the moment like I gotta get on a call with you and and basically just have a water cooler conversation because you're a lot of fun in a lot of the stuff that I read. So I think that was one of the primary reasons I wanted to bring you on today.
Well, I appreciate that greatly. I don't have the mental bandwidth to be anyone but me, so I'm glad that having all of the rough edges come through is amusing or entertaining. And that lazy tutorial video is probably one of the most fun things for me. It's nice to be able to laugh at
Yep.
yourself or to laugh at your own jokes. And for the next few months, given that I have wrapped up the data culture series that I've been doing on my YouTube channel, like the hard work is done. And it's likely that for the rest of the year, we'll just have a trickle feed of those short form, funny but informative videos coming. So
No,
hopefully my schedule will let me stay on top of that.
Okay, yeah, I'm really excited to see more of them, especially if more are coming. Okay, cool. Yep, I was just also checking. They sound like the volume is too low. I tweaked it, and okay, cool. All the audio is up to the appropriate amount. But yeah, so like our the primary thing that I know that your primary focus is on is data flows. One of the reasons we wanted to spend the time today to have some discussions is kind of around that. So and also what value it has as an ETL process, how it can be leveraged within Power BI. So where do you want to start with this conversation as far as like some initial questions that we can go to kind of kindle this fire?
Well, I think that the thing that seems most significant to me is as you and I were chatting and
Mhm.
setting up this call, you talked to some of the other MVPs who do a lot of work with data in Power BI, and you
Yep.
basically said, if we're going to talk about data flows, what are the questions that you want answered? And the one that bubbled up was basically the simplest and therefore most difficult question of
Yep.
why data flows?
Yep.
And whenever someone asks me, why would I use data flows or why data flows, my response is never an answer. It's always a question or a set of questions. So I actually want to push back at
Yeah.
you or to repost to you. Why do we need ETL at all? So where does ETL fit in, or what value does ETL provide for a BI or analytics solution?
I mean, I can probably speak to a lot of the people on this call and myself, where like you connect to a data source and somebody says, oh yeah, like we want you to hit our database and grab the data from the customers table, and you go in there and well, there's about 12 customers tables when I use the search box to find that, and okay, which one am I supposed to do? Oh, well, you're supposed to use the customer's master table. All right. Well, there's three versions of that. Like, which do you want me to use? The view, the table, and then you go into there, and there's 45 name columns, and it's, in general, and that's the point. Like the database is designed to have all of the data, but it's usually, you know, eh, well, in terms of the magnitudes, more data than you will ever need, more columns than you'll ever need. And I know I've spent many client hours having to rake through that to find the diamond or the needle in the haystack of the right data. So data flows and anything else is a great way to provide those master tables, or just ETL is a great way to create a like a data lake, and whether or
Yeah.
not that's in SQL, whether or not that's in data flows, just something to consolidate the data to give you those core tables, the core rows and columns that just make it a lot easier to consume for some semantic models off of that without having to spend all of your time hunting, which is a really expensive process when you're hiring a consultant like myself or somebody else. And it's not that hard. It's just extremely time consuming.
And if we think about that, if I parse that answer apart, and I
Yep.
obviously I'm putting words in your mouth, so
Sure.
correct me if I'm taking a step too far, but the source data that you're working with for any BI application, it was designed for a specific purpose that
Yeah.
wasn't your BI application.
Yep.
And ETL is a way to take that transactional data or IoT data or whatever your source system is producing, and to put it into the shape, the format, the partitions, whatever,
Yep.
the location that will be better for your downstream purposes. And so my next question, getting back to that why data flows, let me ask you sort of another follow-up question.
Sure.
Why do we have self-service BI? So I was a BI consultant for years before I joined Microsoft. So I used integration services and reporting services and analysis services. And all of the stuff that we do with Power BI today, I could do with Visual Studio 15 years ago. Perhaps not all of it, but a lot of it, a lot of the core things, right? So why do we even need self-service business intelligence in the first place?
That's a great question, and I think it's and it's a great analogy considering what's in your background, but it's a double-edged sword. Uh, uh, but there's a fine line between the two of them. Too much self-service BI we've seen, I think, kind of with the first wave of self-service coming out there, where you end up with a lot of data siloing. Like you have 100 teams, 100 different self-contained reports. Everybody's doing their own thing with the data, and they're having a great time with it. They love the ability to start doing analysis off of this. But the downside is you now get 100 different versions of the truth potentially, and even worse, maybe different numbers. There's a I think there's a nice golden ratio with having like some kind of a good connected like golden data set. A set of data flows, a couple of core models that are built off of that, with the option, you know, let's say like Steve or Sharon needs to connect to that, and honestly, they just really like to have these custom shaped tables that has the data a certain way that they want to get it. That's just the way that they like to analyze their data. Maybe they want to actually spit it into Excel with analyze in Excel. So there's scenarios where it's not in a shape and format that they want. They want the numbers, but they want to configure it in their own like shape, just based on personal preferences. I think self-service BI services a lot of that, to be able to give people the freedom to look at data, the same data in different perspectives, that just works for their brain. So I think that's kind of where to me, the middle ground between the two universes is.
And with self-service BI tools, those business users can do it without needing to submit a work request to IT
Hmm.
or wait 6 months to fit into the IT backlog.
Yep.
It's really about having those same core data modeling, data visualization, data acquisition capabilities, but in a shape and tool that is accessible to the
Yep.
less technical personas. So
Exactly.
so that's why data flows. So if you
Hmm.
take the self-service BI and all of the reasons why tools like Power BI exist, and you take the why ETL and you think
Yep.
about the patterns why you would use an ETL tool or create either a data mart, a data warehouse, an operational data store, a data lake, some
Hmm.
data location that exists outside of your source system so that you can use it for other purposes. Data flows exist to allow
Yep.
Power BI or Power Query users, people who are not hardcore ETL developers or data
Yep.
warehouse developers, to complete those purposes, or to do work towards those purposes and to complete solutions that
Yep.
solve that problem without needing to be blocked on IT or the like. And
Absolutely.
there's a bunch of patterns that I see coming up in customer after customer. I'm not sure if we should go down that path or if we should take some of the answers or some of the questions rather that have come in via chat. But to close up on the whole why data flows question, the fact that 2 years after data flows were added and announced in public preview, because it's tomorrow will be 2 years to the day from when
Really,
data flows went into public preview. It was at PASS
that's
Summit in
cool.
2018.
Oh, yeah,
And
happy early anniversary to
yeah,
Dataflows
had
then.
lot of interesting things happen in November, it seems.
Yes.
Uh, but the fact that people who work with Power BI day in and day out, like the MVPs who gave you these questions, the fact that 2 years later they're still asking why data flows, I think that it really shows that the self-service space, the way that we build and maintain and deliver these managed self-service BI
Mhm.
solutions to our users or to our consulting clients, it's still evolving. And I would suspect that the people who ask these questions, they're the people who would have no problem creating a new integration services or data factory or informatica job. They have these hardcore IT non-business user friendly ETL tools already. They have an enterprise data warehouse and they have the ability to update it quickly.
Mhm.
For these users, the data flows value proposition is
Yep.
going to be much less compelling. It's like, hey, do you want a little tool that does some of what you can do already? But for the Power BI slash Power Query user, it's really opening new capabilities. And I see a lot of big organizations deliberately fostering inside their user community the skills to produce and maintain the reusable data assets. And you said certified a couple times earlier. So basically, not just here's customer data, but here's the certified customer entity inside this certified data flow
Yep.
that now everyone can discover easily inside of Power BI Desktop, and it
Mhm.
just works.
Absolutely. And to continue even on that conversation, like you've already mentioned it, it creates the like those core tables that people can connect to that can be certified. It can basically get that stamp of approval. And not only I think does that allow for easier access and cleaner access to data, it also can be a massive uh, performance alleviation off of or it can reduce the burden off of the core data sets. Like if you have 35 different or even hundreds of different models that are connected to and basically doing the same table transformations against the same table against the same database over and over again, easily can overburden an Azure or on-prem data source. And having something that like a pre-processed table that's sitting and has basically been cached in the data flows section or stored there, better said, that can massively alleviate a lot of the connection and and bandwidth that is going against a database otherwise.
Yeah, and that concept of refresh consolidation as well
Mm,
is definitely a key one.
yep.
And this is, this is a not solely a benefit of data flows.
Mm,
This is, excuse me, a benefit of having a data warehouse or other data staging pattern.
mhm.
If you can select from that source system, that transactional system that has other things to do, you get that out once, and then you can
Yep.
use that staged location for the further downstream processing.
Exactly.
Absolutely perfect. And it's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yep. The and just as a quick mention, it's the same idea behind that reverse consolidation, like that recent edition they had a year ago, where for direct query connections, you had that apply filters to slices, so you weren't constantly pinging the database, and you could do it like one time after making selections. You just want to reduce the number of pings and hits against a database whenever possible.
Yes. So, and I see your mouth moving. I'm not sure if that's a lag. So is our audio still working?
Should be. I'm assuming you hear
Yay.
me.
Cool.
Okay, good.
Yep,
Yeah.
I can indeed.
Don't give me
Uh,
a heart attack now.
Well, if something is going to go wrong, let's have it go wrong this first time when everyone's expectations are low. After 4 or 5 of these that go
Yep.
perfectly smoothly, that's when it hurts more if things fail. So I think even though we didn't go down every possible direction for this
Yep.
particular question, I think that we've touched on it. Do we want to
Mhm.
jump into chat and talk about some of the questions that have come in from viewers today?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look. I've been somewhat monitoring them, but I'm trying to see if there's any ones that popped out as a specific question. Have you
So
seen any so far?
I actually want to come up to Excel in control, which may be an oxymoron, but I'm not going to pick on anybody's
Yeah.
YouTube name. And this is because Excel in Control had what I think is both an excellent question and was first in. Do you have like a guy in a QB way to just pull it up and display it from the very top?
I'm
If you can
not
do
that
this.
fancy yet.
Okay.
That will be something that I'll get to at the probably one of the future ones after I
Yes.
ping Adam on how to do that.
Adam and Patrick have set the bar very high, so
Hmm.
no worries, of course.
Yeah.
But Excel in Control asked, when using the enhanced compute engine, I read that it's best to load the needed tables without doing any transformations into a first data flow, and then do the needed transformations in a second data flow. Does it matter if I'm doing so, or if by doing so I'm loading the data that I'm not going to need further downstream? And let me answer in a
Okay.
few different ways. And to say, at the core of this pattern, the reason that we recommend this is that enhanced compute engine for data flows, which is a premium only feature, even though data flows themselves are not premium only, but when you use the enhanced compute engine, in addition to loading the data into the CDM folders in Azure storage, which is what always happens, so it's like text files and folders, it also loads that data into a SQL instance that's managed by the Power BI service and creates column store indexes on every column in every table. So it's
Okay.
basically getting that data into a SQL-based cache that can then be used for downstream data flow processing, and that downstream queries against the upstream data flow can take advantage of both query folding because it's in SQL, not in
Hmm.
text files, and to take advantage of those column store indexes. So that's the reason for this pattern, and it's why following this pattern is required to get you the best performance when using this engine. And for the core question, which is if I'm loading in columns that I don't need in my downstream data flows, does it matter? And the answer is yes, but it matters in different ways. So, from a negative side, having additional data and additional columns means that that initial load is going to be slower. So you'll need to load more data and you'll need to create more indexes on top of it during the refresh of that upstream initial
Yeah.
data flow. But by having that additional data that you don't need today, it also means that a month from now or a year from now, as people are using that upstream data flow as a source for downstream ETL and analytics, if they do need that data, it's available. And this, in many ways, is not really a data flows question. This really comes down to what do I include in my operational data store, in my data warehouse, in my data mart, in my data lake. There's always a trade-off between including data that I don't need for today's requirements, but I suspect that I will need in the future. And you weigh that and the downstream effort of going back and redoing something again as your requirements change to coming up with an initial solution that may not be optimal for today's requirements, but you are making trade-offs to future-proof for expected or predicted downstream use cases and workloads. So, or as Adam has been fond of saying lately, it depends.
The consultant answer, right?
Yes, yes, indeed.
Very good.
So, were you scrolling through chat or through the questions as I was responding to that one? Have you found another one that we might speak to?
I've seen some people kind of comment and then basically nod a bit to what you're saying. Have a couple of follow-ups that talks about the trust between IT controls and SMEs that have been established and a few other things. I don't see one that's specifically been fielded as a question, but you did bring up a topic during um, during your explanation that I think is one that I don't think a lot of people are aware of. So I think it actually would be good to call out, which is the fact that you can do query folding against premium data flows that are, I mean, it's somewhat stored under, well, not somewhat, it is stored completely under a lock and key SQL database, but it is a SQL database. And that was something that again, like when I was posing questions to some MVPs of like what are things you want to know about data flows, there were MVPs who did not know that you could query fold against data flows, and I knew that. I explained that to them, but they didn't realize that was a premium feature. So whether or not that's an issue with the documentation side or just a lack of them doing due diligence to look it up. But it was one of those like I'm surprised you should know this about a feature that's that's so important because query folding is such a massive performance boost whenever you're doing it. And like Alex Powers in the chat who had that like does it fold 30-day challenge. I think it's really important to try to keep it maintained as long as possible and also be aware that the tool even does it in the first place because if as soon as it breaks you can end up with substantially slower queries.
Yeah, and if I play devil's advocate, or if I run with that comment, uh, my personal feeling is that we on the Power BI team have not promoted and documented and fleshed out data flows as well as we could have or should have, and I think that if there's anyone who's been working with Power BI and can't comfortably answer these questions, that's certainly on us. I have put a link to my blog, and this is my personal blog, so all of the rough edges that Reed mentioned earlier are going to come through there as well. But I have lots of data flows posts, including a few recent ones around data flows and the enhanced compute engine, including one which is basically will it fold. So this is, and maybe
Yeah,
if Alex is here, so
he is
maybe
here.
Alex
Yeah.
will have the link. He's our link wizard. I don't know how he does it, but he does it. Uh, but essentially, in that blog post, I look at some of the underlying technical implementation reality that at least a few months ago wasn't well represented in our public documentation.
Okay.
And I do want to call out Charles Webb, who is the PM owner of Power BI Data Flows, who has recently come into this position in the last few months. He
Okay.
has been hard at work getting the documentation updated. So if you are looking at the data flows documentation today and it looks completely different from the last time that you looked a couple months ago, kudos
That's
to
good.
Charles, and he'd love to hear your feedback too.
Yeah, it's definitely a pain point when I go to like a documentation page and uh, screen grabs of the documentation's out of date from from what should be the current documentation. It's one of those like, oh, I was gonna give this to a client. I can't give this like I can't give the outdated documentation to that. So that's fantastic to hear that that's been fleshed out a bit. I'll just say like myself, I'm on the outside of Microsoft, so like it, to whoever has control over this, they should have data flows in the splash screen when you open Power BI of like a connection choice. Two things are bleep not in there. Microsoft data, or sorry, Power BI data sets and data flows. Why aren't those primary connection points of you want to connect to data? Here's two sources you can go to. Those should be there somewhere in front and center because they're the two in-house data connectors. Like, why are those not in there?
So, are you interested in switching over to my screen as well? So I don't have a
Sure.
demo today, but reading through chat, there's a few things both that Reed is mentioning and which Chewy has mentioned in chat. So Chewy actually mentioned earlier on self-service BI is still confusing for many IT departments, he's afraid
Yeah.
to say. You are absolutely correct.
Hmm.
This loss of control or the sharing of control is difficult and scary and painful for people that have always been in full control with a high wall or a barrier between IT and business stakeholders. And one of the things that I see a growing number of enterprise Power BI customers doing, and at least right now, I am still seeing on YouTube in front of me the two of us rather than my screen.
Oh,
So I'm
yep. I can transition now. I wasn't sure if you
oh,
were waiting for that spot, so
nope. Yeah,
there we
please
go.
please do switch over, and we will be good to go.
Should take a
And one of
second.
the
There
there
we
we
go.
go. So one of the
Okay.
patterns that I see is essentially these IT departments and the BI centers of excellence. So this core group of people that are responsible for BI across IT and business. And this is going to be different in every big company. So this may not all apply to you, but basically just as 5 years ago or last year or whenever it was that we started building communities of citizen authors and citizen BI analysts, these organizations are building communities of what they're beginning to call citizen data engineers. And Chris, if you were on the call, I just want to mention that Chris Wagner was the first person that I heard use this phrase, but not the last. But they're basically saying, just as you've been building your own data models and your own reports for your own purposes, here's an opportunity for you to create these building blocks of data that you can use in multiple solutions rather than having like 50 different things refreshing against the same data source, as well as to have those building blocks be usable by other people on your team, in your department, across the organization. And just as a self-service BI solution can mature and grow, this can mature and grow at the same way. So that's basically what I wanted to share here. And that citizen data engineers pattern is something that I see more and more frequently at these mature enterprise Power BI organizations.
Flip that back over. I have
There
a
we go.
really good question that came up again. Excel and Control for the win. What is the best way to build and maintain data flows today in desktop first, then copy and paste? Will there be some sort of integration between desktop and web? That's a great question.
All right, so I will share a few different responses as I often
Yeah.
do, and I want to throw out as a caveat, Power Query Online is getting a ton of love and a ton of investment from the Power Query team. And if you haven't looked at it in a few months, it will be different and much better now than it was the last time that you looked. But Power Query and Power BI Desktop has a decade's head start. So this is a tool that has been getting a lot of love and a lot of investment for many years, even before there were things called Power Query or Power BI Desktop. This was getting invested in. And for me, at least, I will do my data flow, my initial data flows development in Power BI Desktop. I will build, I will test, I will refresh, I will tune my queries in desktop, and I will use that as my core
Hmm.
primary development environment. And when I'm done, I will simply right click on the folder in desktop, go into Power Query Online and hit Control V, and it will put in all of the queries that are in the folder and all of the related or dependent queries. So it brings them over in a group. You don't need to copy and paste the M scripts. You can just
Yep.
grab all the queries. And from that point on, I will use the workspace in which I've created the data flow as the master location for authoring and editing moving forward. So I actually have a multi-stage process that I work through, but just as with any part of Power BI, this is a place where, again, in my opinion, we're lagging in features that would be valuable to have around source control and application lifecycle management and deployment automation and a lot of the pro code capabilities that you would take for granted in a .NET application or Azure Data Factory, perhaps. Power BI doesn't have a lot of those same capabilities. So once you have your data flow created in the service, you may also want to have the model.json file that defines the data flow
Mm.
saved from the workspace, put into your source control, and so on. But it will be up to you to do that yourself.
Yep.
And for the perhaps the $64,000 question of, are there going to be plans to integrate data flows development into Power BI Desktop? This is an awesome question, and I cannot speak to anything that is coming from the Power BI team until it is on the public roadmap. So I cannot answer that question. But what I will say is that we are very aware that the current disconnected authoring
Yeah.
experience where you build data flows in one tool and you build the things that are both upstream and downstream from data flows in a different tool, that this is disjointed and inefficient. So understand that we are aware of the problem, even though I can't talk about the solution, a potential solution.
I'll make two quick couple of comments. I know we're at the 30 mark, but I also don't need to end exactly at, so we'll continue to talk for a while longer until we find a natural resolution to the conversation. Two, somebody made a great mention about the disconnect of this as like one solution is it would be great. Theo786 mentioned it would be really cool if you could publish your like Power Query codes into Power BI from desktop, just similar to how you would do a model. So develop in desktop and click a publish button just for the queries and have them populate up. I did want to kind of expand upon your comment where I know you mentioned you could like right click on a folder and select copy and it copies all the queries and dependencies. The same thing will also happen for a single query. If my one query is based off of 7 staging queries that all combine into that, you right click, copy and paste, same thing kind of happens. It copies the dependencies with it. Like that was one of my favorite things when I found out about Power Query copying between, let's say like Power Pivot and Power BI or Power BI and Dataflows Online, is the fact that like you can so easily copy between them. It's still not perfect, but it's definitely
Yep.
a lot better than having to copy and paste the M code. Because
Yes.
I know when I was copying a model that had about 85 queries in it, yeah, that took me a couple of hours, and I was a grumpy cat at the end of that. Like I was not having a good day. Now select all, copy paste. It's done. It's not
Yeah.
again not perfect, but it's only a couple of seconds to do it if you need to. So it's improved a lot.
Yeah, and if I think back to 2018, when I was one of the vocal internal preview users of data flows, I would often, because this is not my day job, so it'd be like evenings and weekends.
Yeah.
I'm there trying to build and use data flows as part of my pet projects or my demo projects. And I would be recording my screen and sending these angry video repros to the owners of Power Query Online about how frustrating and blah 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 it was, and I want to give absolute kudos to them and the team for the work that they've done to get it to where it is today. It's night and day. And
It's taken leaps and bounds of improvements. Absolutely. Somebody
so
did ask a little bit earlier, just like, is there going to be a demo? We'll have discussions in the slide, but no demos today. If you wanted to expand upon that.
yeah, no, I had some technical issues on my side, so I had planned to have a demo, and
Mhm.
without going into too much details, it is not going to happen. So it's just going to be us yapping and drinking coffee, I am afraid, today. I had actually suggested to Reed that he, instead of using this beautiful hexagon, which by the way is the bestagon,
It
but this
is.
hexagon rich background, that he have two swampy areas in his background so that we could say that this is between two fens. Uh, I never actually, I thought about that.
That's
Uh,
great.
so let me actually jump in. I'd love to answer a few additional
Hmm.
questions if we could, because there are questions that I'd love to get to uh, that are still in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been as it's been thrown through, so I don't forget them. I've been copying and pasting some. If you have any hot questions you want to answer, go right ahead, and I have some I can ferry across to you as well once you're ready.
Well, since you've been curating, let's take your list and
Yeah.
we'll go from there.
Yeah, so this might be a quick question or not, but one person was just wanting to know, like, why can't we connect to data flows inside of Excel's Power Query?
It's coming. I'm pretty sure that we've talked about this publicly. So it's part of the longer term integration plans. But right now, right now, targeting the core scenario of working with data flows inside Power BI Desktop, this is sort of the priority. And getting new code or new capabilities into Excel is surprisingly difficult. So there's
Yeah,
just there's engineering complexity to ship a new capability, even something that from the outside may seem logical or trivial. It's on the longer term plan.
yep,
Hopefully, it will come sooner rather than later.
perfect. Yeah, and even to expand upon that, like a lot of things that might look similar are built off of separate platforms. I forget the two, but like even the Vertipack engine is built off of a different code base between Excel and like Power BI, isn't it? Like they're still roughly the same engine, but I thought they have like some pretty core solid differences between the two of them.
So I have never been an engineer working on the Vertipack tabular engine. So what I'm about to tell you is like stuff that I've listened to in meetings. Who knows
Yeah.
if I'm understanding it correctly, but there is one code base. But as we are deploying, whether it's the tabular engine in Power Pivot in Excel or in Power BI Desktop, for a
Mhm.
Power BI data set, for Azure Analysis Services, for SQL Server Analysis Services tabular, each one of these deployment outputs has different switches, different
Yeah.
options, different configurations, because the host environment or the execution environment in which that engine is being hosted is different. And interesting from an organizational perspective as well. Power BI Desktop ships every month. Power BI Service, we have updates every week. SQL Server in the box, we have a new version every couple of years, and service packs. And
Mhm.
Excel has its own release cadence. And each one of the owners of these products defines what the bar is to include a new feature or to update capabilities. So,
Yeah.
in addition to the technical differences, there's some interesting organizational differences as well.
So yeah, like entirely similar products, but ran by entirely different teams.
Yeah, although it's also worth mentioning the Power Query team, or sorry, the citizen data integration team that owns Power Query, they own Power Query everywhere.
Okay.
And the analysis services engine team that owns the Vertipack engine, they own the Vertipack engine everywhere. So, it's their code, it's their features, but and I'm kind of thinking back to a question that came up during Adam and Patrick's Guy in a Cube stream earlier this morning, where someone was asking, uh, if I'm already using SQL Server Analysis Services on-prem and I have the licenses, should I just stay there or should I move to Azure Analysis Services in the cloud? Where's the benefit? And one of the topics that came up as part of the larger set of responses was basically Azure Analysis Services gets features first. So when you're deploying to the cloud, it's
Yeah.
easy to roll out new updates. If you're using a box, box software, on-premises software that you install and update and maintain yourself, you typically have a slower release cadence because of the distribution, because of the whole end-to-end process. And it's not really it's not the engine, it's all of the interesting context around where the engine is going to run.
No, that's completely fair. Somebody, I don't know if they were being serious or jokingly. Like they said in all caps, "Stay on prem." Like, oh, I embrace the cloud.
and
Uh,
and do
yeah.
do what works for you, right? So
No, that's
this
fair. That's fair.
there's this classic trade-off between the inherent characteristics, and I'm not going to say benefits, but the inherent characteristics of having your own data center with your own hardware and your own software that you install, that you maintain, that you support, that you have this full control over, because literally it's your box in your building,
True.
and having the scalable, elastic stuff in someone else's data center that someone else maintains and updates and patches and secures and controls and so on and so forth. And this is probably beyond the scope of our conversation, but
Yeah.
you need to make that trade-off. But at the same time, the cloud is the future for BI and
Mhm.
for IT in general. And I don't think that anything that we can do is going to change that future. Uh, so if it's everything on-prem, be aware that you're holding on to your horse and buggy when the car is coming down the road.
You got, it's the, I mean, Circuit City to me is always those examples of change or die kind of situation, or go extinct. Whereas if you don't learn to how to at least adapt at a minimum to changes coming, eventually you will find yourself being in the dated category. Do want to circle back to some other questions that we have. Tristan posed a really good question on what are the differences between Power BI data flows and Power Platform data flows, and will they eventually, in quotes, merge?
So that is an awesome question, and that was actually the one that I was going to jump to before
Oh,
I learned
nice.
that Reed had been curating. So we're on the same page here. So
Perfect.
uh, I'm going to riff on my last response and also point out that that citizen data integration team that owns Power Query and Power Query Online and so on, they own a lot of the core capabilities for data flows in Power BI, in Power Apps, for Power Platform data flows, and the integration of Power Query into tools like Azure Data Factory. So even though these are different features of different services today, there's a lot of core code, core ownership, or shared code, shared ownership, and shared capabilities. But when we're comparing and contrasting data flows in Power BI versus data flows in Power Apps, a lot of the difference will come down to what's the difference between Power BI and what's the difference difference between Power BI and Power Apps. So there are different tools used by different people of different personas to create different solutions. But in each of these different contexts, there is a need for data preparation or data ingress. And for data flows in Power Apps, one of the core differences, this is something that is not available in data flows for Power BI, is the ability to load data into a common data service instance. So you build your Power Query queries and you load data into an entity running in CDS. It's basically, loading it into that managed transactional store that your Power Apps are built on. And because of that, it has, capabilities that loading only analytics data for downstream read-only purposes don't have and don't need. And and because Power Apps also have analytics capabilities, they give you the ability to specify whether you're creating a standard data flow that loads into CDS or an analytics data flow that loads into your Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 account, where Power BI only provides what Power Apps would call an analytics data flow capability. And if we think about, are they going to merge? Are they going to become the same? Where it makes sense. If we think about Power BI in this context, Power BI is ahead of the game. We're first in, we're furthest ahead. Uh, the use case for self-service data preparation in Power BI for self-service BI applications, it
Mhm.
was obvious, and we have a feature that has been evolving with things like compute for 2 years now, or 2 years as of tomorrow, as we mentioned earlier. And Power Apps has different use cases and they started later. So at
Mhm.
some point, yes, there will be more of a merging or more consistency between the two different products. But because data flows represents common functionality in different contexts, those
Okay.
different
Yep.
contexts will mean that there will always be things that make sense for Power BI or Power Apps and don't make sense for the other. So expecting them to align 100% should not be the case. You should not expect that.
And I think, I mean, one of the takeaways from that is, it's where the data is being kept. Like you mentioned, the difference between, well, like three different sources right now: CDS, SQL for the advanced compute, and then just blob storage for like just queries. But it's with those different locations, there's still going to be enough of a justification for somewhat different environments in development cadences and just features depending on what the goal is of the tools that it's trying to create the data for.
Yeah. And if you're building a Power BI application, you need data in tables to do analysis on. If you're building a Power App, you need data in a location that Power Apps can work with
Yep.
for the purposes of your app, like whatever app that you and your team are building. So, there's just inherent differences between the two.
Exactly. I'm continually just copying and pasting messages.
Wow.
There's a
You
couple of,
could work in finance with those copy and paste skills.
I know, right? The most worn keys on my keyboard, C and V, probably. Um, there's a couple of more detailed questions, but there's one that again stuck out that I think we've talked about, but we've only I think used we've not used this term a ton, which is one person wanted to shed some light on the what is the advanced compute engine with Dataflows, and we've hit on this a little bit talking about in premium what it does is instead of storing it in blob storage, it stores it more with a layer of SQL that connect to it, which allows you to do query folding and everything else. But maybe if you wanted to, give your like a 2 or 3 minute summary specifically on what does advanced compute mean, I think that would be very useful.
Excellent. So let me respond first of all by saying I've put into chat a link to the
Mm,
Dataflows landing page on my
okay.
BI Polar blog. So go there. There are videos and blog posts that go into much more detail
Mm,
than this response will. But before we can queue up and speak specifically about the enhanced compute engine, let's talk about what data flows do in their default state. So when you create a data flow, you're basically building a Power Query that says get data from these sources and transform it in this way.
yep.
And when you save and refresh the data flow, that query is being executed and the data is being stored in a CDM folder or Common Data Model folder in Azure storage that is either managed by the Power BI service, or if you choose it, it's in your Azure subscription. But by default, all of this is it's just magically handled by the Power BI service, and you never need to know that there's anything Azure going on. So you create a data flow, you refresh it, the data is stored in CDM folders. A CDM folder is literally a folder full of text files and a JSON file that contains metadata. There's a little bit more to it than that, but the key thing is the data is physically stored in CSV files. And if you think about CSV files, you're probably not thinking about great data scale, great data
Mhm.
performance if you're doing a lot of analytics on top of them, because in order to do processing on that data, you need to load that data in and work with it in memory, because CSV files as a storage mechanism do not have any compute capability associated with
Yep.
them. And there are lots of ways to think about storage and compute. The way that the enhanced compute engine and Power BI data flows works is that when you are you drinking a beer already, Reed? I just
Kombucha.
oh, kombucha.
It,
Yeah,
it look
okay.
it looks like a beer bottle. It's been a
Look,
long
I'm
week,
still on
Matthew.
coffee.
It's been a long week.
It has been a long week, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Uh, so so we have with the enhanced compute engine, when we refresh the data flow, at the same time that the data is being written out to those CSV files, it is also written to tables in a SQL instance that is managed by the Power BI service. So it's
Hmm.
basically putting the data both into the CSV files for the longer term storage, and it's using the SQL database as a cache of the same data, and it loads the data into those tables and it builds column store indexes on top of those tables for improved compute performance. And then when you are either connecting to the data flow using direct query, which is another discussion on its own, or if you are refreshing a downstream data flow that uses your compute engine backed upstream data flow as a source, all of the queries going against that data flow, because it uses the compute engine and because the compute engine is creating a SQL column store index based cache of the data, all of the queries will go against that cache, which means that it's in memory. You have the ability to do query folding. It's just basically faster than going against text files in a folder
Yep.
for most data scales and for most performance scenarios. But let me throw out as a caveat, the compute engine is a black box to you as a Power BI user, developer, or administrator. There's not a lot of levers. There's not a lot of insight into what's going on. So you can use it and see improved performance, but If you are, let's say, hypothetically, and this is a scenario that I saw across my inbox a couple weeks ago, if you have a data flow entity with billions of records in it, and you are planning to use direct query against that data flow entity for a report,
Jesus.
probably don't expect the best direct query performance because you don't have the ability to super tune the indexes for your specific workloads.
Yeah, like it's and I think like I mentioned briefly earlier, it's under lock and key. Like it's there, it's doing it, but it's all automatically configured for you. You
Yes.
cannot go in like a DBA and configure all of that. There's one follow-up question I had to that. Also, I did just make you a moderator in the chat, which is something I didn't know was required for links. So if you can repost the link you had earlier, it should now be a clickable link for you. And my follow-up question is because now with the advanced compute engine, you basically you load your data, it loads it into the actual blob storage, and then it then builds that cache layer on SQL on top of it. I'm assuming the capacity for both of them is mirrored. Like whatever upper limit there is for data flows would be the upper limit of the ability for the SQL layer to also create as well. Correct?
I don't know if I followed the question, so I'm going to reply by saying the resources that are used for the compute engine are they come from the pool of available memory and vcores that are used by your premium
Okay.
capacity. So does that answer the question that you were asking, or no?
Well, I was just thinking, is there like whatever upper row limit there is just for like standard, just for the limit of data flows, like would the SQL hit a limit in terms of running out of size or space available to it before the blob storage would? Meaning like you could actually load more, but there's going to be an issue where like one becomes over capacity before the other.
So I honestly I don't have an answer to that. All that I
Sure.
can say is we have never run into that problem. I don't know enough about the internals to answer that. At least not in a public venue. I'm not going to think out loud too much.
Well, if you haven't, and the fact that you've already mentioned that in theory you could have billions, it's if there is an upper limit, it's extremely high and well above what the majority of the people out there would be pumping into data flows. And data flows generally, like, I'll even just say, like, you probably shouldn't be loading billions of rows into data flows. Like, it's not really designed, my understanding is to handle nearly that much. You should be having data that hopefully doesn't hit quite nearly that large of a scale, especially if you're trying to do direct query.
Yeah, yeah. If you think about the slide that we shared earlier,
Mhm.
talking about that citizen data warehousing pattern, one of the things that I didn't mention, but which was bolded on the slide, is that data flows are not designed to be and will not be an effective replacement for an enterprise data warehouse. So
Yep.
if you're thinking about billions of rows of scale, or billions of rows of data and the need to scale with the best possible performance, this is something where you need the care and feeding and the curation and all of the love that goes into tuning a resource like Azure Synapse Analytics or SQL Server or whatever it is for your specific workload. And data flows, it's possible that they might scale to that, but they're probably not going to have the controls and the tuning, the raw performance or the manageability that a pro data warehouse platform will provide.
Yep.
They're not That's not the problem they're trying to solve, even though they fall well into the data warehouse or data mart pattern. They don't have the characteristics that you would want a true enterprise data warehouse to have.
I completely agree. It's not designed for that scale or that level of customization. I do know we're coming close to the hour. There's a couple of other, I think, really good questions before we wrap up. And I'll ask the question and expand upon that. But we had one is there a plan to move the ability of merging and appending? And I also believe referencing to non-premium data flows.
So I'm going to interpret that as being linked and computed entities
Yes.
where you can build data flows that use other data flows and just have that cascade down so that when the upstream ones refresh, the downstream ones automatically refresh. To the best of my knowledge, no, there are no plans to bring that to non-premium, but there are a few different things that may mitigate the pain of hearing that no.
Yep.
The first one is that premium per user is coming sooner rather than later, reducing the cost of entry to using the premium features in Dataflows.
Yep.
Second, you can have data flows that reference other data flows without using premium today. You just don't get that composable ETL with the auto refresh. The simple way that you do this is you you create your upstream source data flows, you build a downstream destination data flow that references them, and then for all of the linking, you clear the enable load checkbox. So when you refresh your downstream data flow, it's just running the queries from the upstream data flow. It's not it's not taking advantage of the cache in the same way. But the biggest downside of this is that you would then need to manually orchestrate the refreshes between the upstream and the downstream, uh, rather than simply having Power BI do it for you. A few months ago, this was very difficult to do. Last month, I believe it was, we updated, or we released APIs that will allow you to monitor the refresh status for your data flows so that you can trigger either a downstream data flow or data set refresh when your upstream data flow refresh completes. And there is a blog post on my blog about that as
Okay.
well. And even though I don't believe that we have announced dates or details yet, we're also working on native Power Automate integration so that if using the REST APIs isn't something that appeals to you, we'll have something that's a little bit more accessible coming, hopefully in the near or short-term future.
Perfect. I'm sorry, I'm just reading the comments once again.
It's all
People,
good. It's too much for me to keep up with, so I appreciate that.
yep. Yeah, people are loving the answers so far. One person just mentioned to with great power comes great responsibilities. So use your moderator capabilities with moderation.
Oh,
um,
who was that? That person? Can I
Fernando
eject him?
Calero. You have that power now. I think you can kick
And it's
someone.
and the actual saying is, with great Power BI comes great responsibility BI. So as long as we can get
Nice.
that to catch on, then my work here will be done.
You know what? If you need to get that, if you want that to catch on, the first step is you got to have a T-shirt that says that. Yep.
I'm wearing hoodies all day, every day these days, so nobody gets to see my t-shirts.
Underneath there, it's Schrodinger's T-shirt. It could be mini T-shirts. It could be no T-shirt. We don't know.
I just for the record, I am not wearing pants today
You know, like
or
yeah.
this year.
You only see the top up. That's the only thing that's important for the camera. Let's
Yes,
see.
indeed. So we
See if
probably have time for one more. Do we want to make
yeah.
this an important one or a jokey one?
That's a great. I have a couple of questions left, and there's not. I think you already kind of answered it because one of them was the merge and append, and like the specific transformations. The other one was the linked entities, and I think a couple of other ones are just some technical questions. So unless you had one, I have one question left I can fire off at you.
Please do.
Yeah, it's a why, and I don't know about this because I've not seen it, but why does the data flows that connects to another data flow not appear in the lineage view?
So if you are seeing a data flow that uses another data flow as a source, I
Hmm.
would expect that to appear in the lineage view. Uh, and yeah, so file a bug, open a support ticket. I would
Okay.
expect that to work.
Yep. Yeah. Good answer as always. It's one of those like, is it a bug or a feature? Sometimes you're not always sure. But it
Yeah.
sounds like that should show up then if it's not.
Yes, I actually ran into something. I was live tweeting some data flow stuff a couple weekends ago, and I ran into behavior that I wasn't expecting in the lineage view, and emailed the folks that own the lineage view and data flows, and they're
Yep.
like, "Yep, we have a bug on this. It's a P3. We might not get to it for a while, but there's sometimes there's rough edges."
Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, exactly. It's just time and effort to get to the polished level. But I do know we're at the hour. One thing I think honestly we should do is because we weren't able to do a demo today, I totally think we should definitely do a follow up to this with a demo sometime soon. The band-aid's been ripped off, and outside of 130 dropped frames, only 0.1%. It basically the stream seems to have gone perfectly. So I think this will be very easy to do. Again, if you're down to show like a demo for a future one.
Well, I think that that would definitely work. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the call, we were planning on having a demo today, and technical difficulties on my end prevented that. But we would love to join you again. Once you have all the kinks worked out, this was pretty smooth today.
Exactly. Yep. And moderating wasn't as complicated as I thought it would be. It's always the doing fast task switching between listening and also trying to scan the chat window. I do think one thing I'll actually do next time to make it very clear is I'll ask people to start any question with a Q or an actual question word. That way it's easy to scan and copy paste.
That never works for Adam. This is one of my biggest frustrations for the Guy in a Cube live stream is like 50 frickin' times. Like, please make sure that you put a Q in front of your questions. And everybody's like, ha, ha, me.
There you go.
Maybe
Yeah.
maybe it only bugs me.
No, I'm. It's as the person trying to scan through it. It's one of those like I'm like, wait, is that a question or is that a rhetorical question? But yeah, otherwise, I'll just wrap up and then let you as well after me, Matthew. But everybody, thanks for tuning in. If you're uh, if you're not a subscriber yet, I'll just give my elevator pitch to myself. Please absolutely hit that subscribe button down below. You're also welcome to become a channel member if you like this content and want to provide a little bit of love and support to us. Otherwise, Matthew, it's been really awesome to have you on today. I've loved the water cooler conversations we've had. I've learned a couple of things about data flows. I'm sure the people in the chat have absolutely learned quite a lot, and I just want to thank everybody for taking some time of the day, whether or not it is morning, afternoon, or evening, or night, for people tuning in the chat as well. And then from that, welcome to let you give any closing remarks of yourself as well.
All right. I just want to say thanks, everybody. I am amazed that we had 60 people showing up. So for a first live stream for a topic that's
Yes.
not all DAX heavy, like which tends to draw the big crowds, I was
Yeah.
super happy. Thank you to everyone for the questions, and
There you go.
can't wait to do it again. And maybe I'll check the news and see if anything interesting has happened in the last hour or two.
Yeah. Hopefully, everybody's Saturday is going to be a little bit better today for reasons.
All right. Thanks
All
very
right.
much, Reed, and thanks to everyone. We'll see you soon.
Cheers.